everything hinges on whether or not that's actually the case, that was the intent. And so in all those cases, I think we have to be very careful about the assertions we make, including myself. A lot of these things I'm thinking, well, those really do look like reference marks, and that's how I would use them. But, of course, I could be totally wrong about that, because theoretically aliens wouldn't think like us.
Yes. That reminds me of something I have kept in mind for maybe 60 years. Reading just a couple of lines in a book that stood out so prominently of one entity speaking to another person and saying, "What is the color of that house?" And the person said, "Well, the two walls that I am able to see are white."
There you go, yes.
I love that, and it just kind of go, wow. So I don't even know China exists because I've never been there.
Right.
But that's fabulous, and that's the only way I think that you actually leave it open to inspiration and understanding.
Right. You don't necessarily try and place your projections on that which you haven't yet figured out. Yeah.
Ah, cool. So, did you... I'm
starting to lose you here. Your volume is fading.
Okay, we've been having a little bit of technical thing here since yesterday with volume. I don't know what it is, and the tech department across from me has fixed it as much as possible.
There we go. Yeah, we've picked up some, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, yeah.
Everything's all right?
Yeah, the volume's okay now, yeah.
Okay. On this, what is it telling us within this analysis that it could be, it's geared to Earth cycles a lot, the solstice, the equinox, and time and space. So you think it's a time map?
I think it's could be an indicator that way, and also at the time that article was written about the Clatford crop circle or glyph, because they're not really circles. At the time that was written, we had yet to have the appearance of all of the animal-shaped forms of the recent glyphs, as well as these two that I'm calling the encyclopedic glyphs that have appeared. If you want to see what these are, you can go to cropcircleconnector.com and look for the crop circles that appeared in May, June, and July. And from May 15th onward, you'll see that there appears to be a couple sets of patterns that are appearing. So now we can no longer take the article that I wrote in the analysis on that glyph in isolation, because there's two themes within that glyph that are repeated within the more recent encyclopedic form that seem to have alien symbols in them. But at the time, what we instantly have in that is the issue of bilateral symmetry around a central point that's slightly disconnected from this other supporting base, if you will. And the base itself has reference marks and this notch in it, as well as these three spheres. And the whole thing is about cycles and balance and imbalance. And instantly when you think about cycles, or at least I do, within the context of Earth and our particular set of circumstances here, I start thinking from the equinox on. We have two of those, and they're the days of equality, where the day is the length of the night. Then we have the solstices, which are the points of standing still. And so it's easy for me to map those on this particular glyph. And then that may be, again, that's one of those assumptions that I'm just laying out there that may indeed be wrong. But from that point on, we can proceed to some other conclusions, some of which seem to be referencing a slight deviation, because the central large sphere in the base, which is right next to these four vertical marks in the photo, or in the JPEG, the reference marks, that central base is slightly off-centered. In fact, it's off by about 6 degrees, 6 something. And the point of separation of the notch is not. The notch itself is equidistant from the two supporting spheres, but the central sphere, the large pendulum sort of thing that's not quite down to the same level, is off at a specific amount. That specific amount, curiously, also is referenced in, let me see if I can find it here, in the, I guess you'd have to call it, the alien encyclopedic glyph of the just a few days ago. And in that one, people are interpreting that structure as a sextant, and I don't buy that particular interpretation, but I do...
Okay, can I
Sure.
interrupt you at this moment so we can take a little break?
Sure, I can babble on about this for a long time.
Over the cliff.
There we go. And also people can go and look at cropcircleconnector.com and see some of these, yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay. This is Way Beyond the Ordinary with Clif.
We are with the very Beyond the Ordinary Clif on Beyond the Ordinary. And you know what? When you said 6 degrees, I'm thinking 6 degrees. That reminds me of something. Is something about 6 degrees.
People connections. People connected to one another, I think.
Yeah, what's his name?
Yeah, the 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
This may more be related to our offset at various different levels within the solar system and then the solar system relative to the Milky Way. But it's just a measured, rather precise.
You saw this. I've got to tell you, when you said that, it popped in. It's like you don't see it until it's pointed out, and then I see that off-center.
Right.
And the little marks.
Yeah, the little reference points there, yeah.
Yeah.
Which are intended, no matter what, intended to draw at least the visual eye towards that particular feature. So it wasn't like they just hung it there. And the reference marks at a visual level, if you were to just take them away, actually are somewhat obscuring of the deviation. But so they're both intended to draw the eye, but reduce the apparent amount of it. But I got in and measured with as precise as we could an image. I've got some fellows that take these aerial photos of these features, and they sent me some. Were very kind and sent me some very accurate resolution photos. Very large, took forever to download. But when we actually measured it out, it came out to about 6.67. And my level of deviation with my particular measuring unit probably means that it's close to the golden mean at 618. So, but in any event, regardless, that aside, now we find that on the current set of glyphs that have come in June and July, that this theme of the notch and the 3 spheres is repeated. And so, for instance, you'll find it within the encyclopedic one that has the, I guess you'd call it a structure at the top, and then goes to a series of sweeping arcs that lead over to these little boxes, down from which hang what appear to be alien symbols. And that one took 3 days to build. It's so large. Then there was another glyph that appeared that shows this what they call a swallow shape, or in my way of thinking about it, it appears to show a balance beam. And again, hey, there's delta there. There's difference, because the left side is not as large as the right, and the right side, they know that this is the case, but the right side from our viewpoint is larger, and therefore we would think of as having more weight, and guess what? It's slightly off-center relative to the other elements in the structure, as though in a balance beam it would hang down more. Sort of makes sense?
Well,
yes, is that why you're not quite in sync with the pendulum thing, and what would that mean anyway?
Well, here's the thing. There's a bunch of deviations in deltas that, let me see, there was this guy, I'm trying to remember his name, I'll come up with it here, but he wrote this marvelous book on basically differential calculus when applied to the solar system and the rest of the universe, and his conclusion was that some people that are really, really, really smart and or space aliens built the pyramids. Why is this? But because in the pyramids themselves is encoded the deviation that we find here naturally within Earth. And you say, well, what deviation is that? And the thing is that no matter what we think about it in our human history, for most of our human history, that is to say until we had space travel, we thought that the Earth was round. And it's not. It's what's known as an oblate spheroid, sort of flattened at the poles and a little bit fatter in the middle. And there is therefore a difference. If you take the measurement of the Earth and took a giant tape measure and you went pole to pole, you would find that there's a slight deviation between that measurement and the measurement of the Earth around the equator, some 26 miles in actual distance. Of course, 26 miles is curiously 26, which is also the number of thousands of miles we are from the middle of the Milky Way. It's also the number of thousands of years that are in our precessional equinox spinning. And we go on and on and on. So it's a very meaningful set of differentials relative to our planet and our solar system. And it's encoded in a number of these objects, including Angkor Wat and a few of the others that were part of the Great Pyramid building structure age. But most specifically, the pyramids at Giza also include this. And the differential may be much more important to things than is at first apparent, because it may be that this slight difference in differential also works at a hyperdimensional level and allows energy and matter to transfer. And without that differential, we would be in a locked state. So it may be like the ultimate key to the universe if you could really figure it out. You know, the answer is 42. Now what's the question? Well, in this case, our answer is this slight differential, which we now see starting to creep into a lot of the crop circles. When you go around and you start measuring the glyphs, you see that some of these central points are offset ever so slightly. So they're not perfectly aligned. And that perfect alignment, or the offset, frequently does not involve any of the natural terrain. In other words, they didn't do it that way because it was ever so slightly down the side of a hill. In many cases, it had to be engineered into the glyph itself at some level of precision. And so the differential may be important at that level. So if we were to say that, just taking as an example, that the Clatford glyph referenced 2012 and the alignment reference marks, those little 4 marks on the 2 on each side of that central pendulum, might refer to alignment, because that's what we as humans use reference marks for, everything from sewing to baking, or building boats or buildings or anything like this. You'll see that constantly workers are out there making reference marks where 2 pieces of anything have to join. And so this naturally brings up the issue of alignment. And say they were talking about alignment in 2012. Well, maybe they're talking really about a 6-degree differential on it, and therefore not exactly into 2012. You see what I'm saying as to where
Absolutely.
the differential may be important?
So then this differential may be showing us what we know, which is the universe isn't perfect, because if it was perfectly aligned, nothing could change?
Well, basically you have to think about it this way. If you held in your head the image of matter as solid little tiny micro-miniature atomic element rocks whizzing around each other, even at that level, if you think of atoms and molecules as being solid, then at some point we would instantly stop breathing, everything would stop respirating, because all of these solids would pack together, and you wouldn't have enough strength to overcome the huge column of air that theoretically sits over your head and you pump in and out of your lungs, and everything would die. As a matter of fact, all the blood would eventually pool, the heavier atoms would sink to the bottom of your feet, etc. Now, this happens to some small, infinitesimal degree, but not to the point where everything shuts down. And it is the differential